What happens when a single U.S. aircraft carrier, 100,000 tons of floating steel, faces over 90 coordinated Russian drones and missiles designed to sink it? The first wave strikes. Sailors fight through fire, and the ship is left limping. But here's the real question. How does a carrier that looks like it's seconds from disaster strike back so hard that an entire enemy fleet collapses before sunrise? In the next few minutes, we'll watch that transformation unfold step by step. Imagine staring at a combat radar and watching more than 100 red blips light up at once, every one of them racing toward your ship. You know there are seconds left before impact. The first salvo of Russian cruise missiles is already airborne, closing the gap at supersonic speed. An escort destroyer reacts immediately, its vertical launch cells rumbling as Standard Missile 6 interceptors scream into the night sky. Each missile tears upward faster than Mach 3, reaching for the incoming threats before they can even cross the horizon. The first impacts look like distant fireworks, fireballs of broken steel and scattered fragments arcing back toward the sea. That is only the outer ring of protection. As more missiles slip through, the second layer kicks in. Evolved Sea Sparrow missiles rise from launch tubes, tracking targets that manage to dodge the SM-6 blast zones. They streak outward in bursts, guided by radar operators who know missing even one means disaster. Some threats come from below, submarine-launched missiles climbing fast, and the ESSMs catch them mid-arc, shattering them into fragments before they can drop back toward the waterline. Then, another kind of alarm fills the carrier's command center. Dozens of fast-moving drones appear on the radar screen, different signatures than missiles, lighter and more erratic. They confuse automated systems by changing altitude and scattering their approach angles. Crew members are forced to decide, within seconds, which targets are live warheads and which are merely distracting shapes. Close-in weapon systems whirl to life, barrels spinning at 4,500 rounds per minute. The ripping sound of 20mm shells fills the air as they carve glowing paths across the night sky, drawing fiery lines toward the closest drones. On deck, the carrier's mounted lasers cut beams through the darkness, slicing into the wings of suicide drones and sending them in spirals into the waves below. Sparks and metal fragments scatter across the ocean surface. The system performs nearly flawlessly, erasing 48 drones before they reach the perimeter. But almost is not enough. Two manage to slip through, approaching from low altitude at an angle radar systems struggle to track. They strike the stern of the carrier almost simultaneously. Explosions throw fire across the flight deck, shattering parts of the elevator systems and igniting scattered fuel lines. Flames climb through the hangar deck, choking the air with smoke. Sailors scatter, but immediately begin sealing compartments and dragging fire hoses into place. Medics dart between injured crew, carrying stretchers, wrapping tourniquets, and shouting over the roar of alarms. Corridors grow dark with smoke, but still the ship holds steady, refusing to list, refusing to stall. In that moment, fear and determination fill every corner of the vessel. Two small drones forced the difference between losing a fleet's crown jewel and keeping it alive. The defense held, barely, but the ship's fight was not done, because now the question shifted. What happens when a carrier refuses to stay on defense and prepares to strike back? A carrier commander's words can decide in a single breath whether a ship spends its last minutes defending or rises to strike back. On the bridge, the chaos of smoke and alarms gave way to a sharp silence as men and women watched the captain's face. Fires burned at the stern. Bulkheads dripped with salted water from hoses. Dozens of sailors had been carried below decks with burns and broken bones. And still the sensors picked up returns that suggested Russia was not done, that another hammer of incoming missiles might already be lifting from their launchers. If that wave came, everyone knew the carrier would not survive trading evenly for another round. There was no time for speeches. The choice arrived as three short words. Strike back now. Below the flight deck, racks of hatches opened, exposing rows of armed unmanned aerial vehicles prepped for rapid launch. Their electric engines hummed and whined as crews guided them out, wings unfolding on the carrier's scorched deck. At the same time, Spaces deeper in the hull shuddered with mechanical noise as fast attack boats were fueled and rigged with shaped charges. The order hadn't just activated a response. It had triggered the full application of what the Navy calls distributed lethality. Instead of concentrating firepower in one place, every available asset was about to spread out and attack simultaneously from angles the Russians could not cover. 80 drones lifted off in less than 2 minutes. They didn't climb high. They skimmed low across the waves, guided by encrypted feeds that linked them in swarming formations. Each one carried only a 15-pound payload, not enough to sink a frigate by itself, but more than enough to break the electronic eyes and ears of a fleet. They threaded between Russian radar beams, their composite shells reflecting almost nothing, and when the swarm reached its zones, dozens dived on antenna farms, targeting dishes and missile control domes. Explosions rippled across decks. One cruiser saw its fire control radar go dark in an instant. Another ship's launch systems locked up as smoke rolled across its upper decks. In 7 minutes, more than 40 radar and missile sites had been torn apart. The Russian squadron, which only a half hour earlier looked like the Hunter, was blind. For the sailors watching on consoles inside the carrier, the shift was immediate. Green lights illuminated where enemy radars had once pulsed. Reports came back showing Russian officers scrambling without data links, firing weapons into open water, unsure what was even striking them. The crew could see the panic, fragmented radio calls filled with static, navigation broken. The order to unleash everything had changed the battle in a single decision, flipping the carrier from cornered prey into an apex predator with reach across the sea. Yet as unmanned aerial vehicles circled and enemy radars burned, another wave of weapons was already setting loose. Autonomous boats were rolling into the water, their wakes cutting white streaks toward the horizon. What if dozens of small unmanned boats, each costing less than a modern missile, could cripple billion-dollar warships before the sun even rose? That is what surged across the waves as the American carrier's counterattack reached its second phase. Dozens of fast attack drone craft, sleek and stripped down for one purpose, fanned out from under the carrier group. Each boat carried a deadly charge, small enough to hide under a tarp, but powerful enough to punch through hull plate. Their engines screamed as they tore across the dark sea at 50 knots, wakes glowing white against the night. For Russian crews who had just watched their radars go dark, the sight of the incoming swarm was a nightmare come alive. Every weapon on those ships opened at once. Heavy deck guns rolled back and hammered into the water, each shell detonating in plumes taller than a man. Rockets arced downward, exploding in spray just short of the leading boats. Small arms rattled frantically from exposed decks, sailors firing in panic as tracer rounds skittered across the waves. Several drones shattered under this barrage, fireballs lighting up the night as fragments sprayed into the sea. Yet the line did not break. The rest closed the gap faster than the Russian crews could reload. 17 boats made it through. In less than 3 minutes, they reached the heart of the fleet. One drone slammed high on the hull of a destroyer, detonating its shaped charge against the steel and ripping open the engine compartment. A second raced for the aft of another destroyer, exploding beneath its helicopter deck and igniting stored fuel. A third carved a hole through the side of a frigate, breaching below the waterline so fast that pumps could not even slow the flooding. Metal screeched, bulkheads crumpled, decks buckled from the force. Within moments, thousands of tons of steel were listing, fires leaping skyward, and hundreds of sailors were thrown into the black water. At the same time, the attack did not just come from the surface. Deep below, a U.S. submarine fired Tomahawk cruise missiles into the fight. Each 1,000-pound warhead skimmed low across the water, invisible to Russian eyes, until they struck command ships and ammunition holds. The blasts wiped out senior officers and detonated fuel depots, plunging coordination into chaos. Above, helicopters cut in, rotors screaming as they tilted low over the burning hulls. Navy SEALs inside unleashed streams of tracer rounds from miniguns, sweeping the decks and silencing the last machine gun nests. One crippled ship after another was scoured of defenders in minutes. By dawn, the sea told the story in smoke and fire. Russia's fleet was broken apart, over 600 dead, 400 more wounded, and only 3 ships left afloat. Oil slicks stretched for miles. Debris drifted with the current. Sailors clung to lifeboats. And in the middle of it all, the American carrier, scarred at the stern but still moving under its own power, remained alive. Its survival had not just saved a single ship, it had marked a turning point that redefined what modern naval combat would mean. Survival that night was not about the steel plates of a carrier or the thickness of its armor. It came down to speed, coordination, and the decision to counterstrike before a second wave arrived. Turning chaos into control within minutes made the difference between ruin and dominance. The future of naval warfare favors those who can turn weakness into momentum instantly. Weapons alone aren't enough. What matters is how they are used together. So what do you think? Will supercarriers remain symbols of strength or simply stepping stones toward distributed fleets? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to stay ahead of the technological revolutions reshaping global defense.